Good evening, kind listener. Let me begin by extending all gratitude to you for granting this tale an audience. For a story is born for the telling. Its words are flightless birds lifted only by the act of being heard. Incantation alone does not give them flight. So I thank you for giving this story the refuge of your imagination. The Huntsman and the Beast. The huntsman lived with his sister and young son in the wooden house on the edge of town. The long, accursed winter had taken a heavy toll. Hunger's shadow haunted the homestead. By night the beast's howl would echo hunger up from the still dark trees and across the cold meadow. The huntsman's heart hung heavy. Winter's clutches had loosened his standing as the town's champion protector and provider. The nights weighed down upon him heaviest as he stood watch over his son's restless sleep. The promise he had made to his darling wife on her deathbed broke just a little more. Childbirth had stolen her from them 5 years before, and now his duty above all was to provide for the son she had left him. Crestfallen, he had raised the boy and tended his bedridden sister dutifully and alone. His sister, 3 years his junior, had not walked since she were but a child. It was the huntsman's annual tradition to carry his sister to the glade, deep within the forest where the snowdrops would flower, signaling the first days of spring. They would lay gifts and offer song in hope that the old forbidden gods would look kindly upon his sister, and she may walk again. This year was no different. Winter's days were numbered on the calendar. It was the first dawn of spring, and yet her coming offered no relief. Her buds hung frozen on the vine. They had crept out as dawn's first frost crawled down from the mountain. The huntsman carried his sister in his arms. His boy followed in his shadow through the petrified fields and into the forest. The light was failing as they reached the glade. The huntsman laid his sister down amongst the closed, hard buds of the snowdrops. He knelt with his son in silence. His sister laid a corn doll, the boy a rabbit's foot, and the huntsman buried a cold blade. They raised their faces and palms to the heavens and cast their sacrilegious sermon unto the old gods and the kings that had gone. For hours their forbidden chanting rang through the forest night. The moon's silver light cut through the trees and illuminated the scene as the three emerged from the trance of worship. The great forest hushed. The wind ceased. The glade darkened a shade. The air froze, damp about his neck, and he felt a familiar presence. Emerging out of the darkness on the high ground above them, rose the beast. The huntsman rose slowly to his feet, lifting his gaze to meet the beast's eyes. It stood above the huntsman and his family with a growling hunger he knew only too well. The beast did grow. Like shadow cast of the darkest night, its fur bristled, reached out, and wove itself into the forest's burr. The huntsman met the beast's stare with equal knowing and ire, and there they stood. The yellow eyes of the beast were blades beneath the cloak of night, and it was all the huntsman could do to hold his gaze and not lower it to its mouth that opened like a wet wound slashed across the dark fur. Instinct commanded his hand to his shoulder where his gun always hung. He reached in vain, for he were not able to carry both his sister and gun, and thus had given his boy the weapon to carry. He issued a whisper to his son, a slow order to raise the barrel on the beast. He drew his knife. The beast saw the silver of the blade and took to the sky. It held there in the air above the huntsman and then dropped, bringing its huge clawed fist down across his face with all its terrible weight. The force of the blow flung him spinning to the ground, his head wrung with black pain. He felt his hot blood flow as he hit the soft, wet earth. The beast was upon him as he lost consciousness. Rich, dark sleep was closing in. He looked to where his kin stood. Momentarily, before the blackness engulfed him, the trees parted, and a shaft of luminescent light cast down upon his son and sister, enveloping them in a warm celestial glow. He reached out, but the blackness took him, and he let go of the world. And the world did release him, and the huntsman sank below. The huntsman heard the bird song before he opened his eyes. He felt warmth in the ground beneath his wounded face. It took all of his strength to open his eyes and return to the world. All sign of the beast was gone, and with it, his only son. Dread closed its black hand about his heart. He pulled himself to his knees and looked about him for signs of life, and there, surrounded by a sea of snowdrops in bloom, stood his sister. Slowly she turned, teetering, precarious as a newborn foal. She took the first step she had taken since she were a child. She stood before the huntsman, on his knees in the snowdrops. She took his wounded face in her hands and pressed him to her. The miracle was lost on the huntsman. He was a barren land where no love could seed nor grow. She spoke of how the beast had lifted his son in his jaws and made off into the trees. The huntsman tore himself away to follow the trail, but collapsed close to death. She pulled him to his feet and reasoned that he was too weak and that he must return to the town and rally reinforcements. Defeated, he clung to his sister, and they staggered homeward through the trees. About them the forest was waking. The wind had repented its icy grip and now carried spring's song. The long, long, accursed winter was done. After 2 long days and nights, the 2 figures emerged from the trees. Across the dawn mists, the church bell declared their coming, and the townsfolk flocked to the pair as they staggered into the town square. The huntsman collapsed, bloody and mute, at his sister's feet on the church steps. The town was a-quiver with fervour. A murmuration of suspicious chatter rose from the rabble. The hunter's son lost? Gone? And in turn his sister walks? The beast was proven as murderous as it was mortal, stronger even than their own champion hunter. Moreover, their fears of the unnatural were compounded by winter's sudden end. Accusation of heretic rituals were hurled at the pair. Zealous was the chaplain as he raged until the huntsman's sister confessed of their idolatry among the snowdrops. The chaplain commanded the huntsman be gone from the town. The huntsman offered no resistance. His fate was sealed. His sister was taken screaming into the church's care, and the huntsman was cast out. He left the town at sundown. From the wooden house he took only his gun and 6 silver bullets before disappearing into the trees. Hot tears flowed down his torn face, for try as he might, he could not conjure the face of his lost and only son. Only the eyes of the beast burned. They burned a fearsome yellow, as they had done since he was a boy 10 years ago, when the huntsman and the beast first began their fateful dance, and the black rabbit's curse was cast.